Hi, everyone. It is Friday, June 7th. You are listening to the Mo.news podcast. I am Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts. We read all of the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. As you could tell, it is just me again today. Moshe will be back on Monday. I am sure that he would want me to report that today is National Donut Day. So look for tons of free donuts from Krispy Kreme, Dunkin' Donuts, Tim Hortons, 7-Eleven. And while a lot of these quote unquote food holidays exist mostly for PR purposes, this one actually has some history behind it. The Salvation Army back in 1938 established the first Friday in June as National Donut Day as a way to honor the organization's donut lassies. Those were women who traveled to France to serve donuts and other snacks to soldiers during World War I, which should make you feel even better as you chow down on a sweet donut today. All right, now to the news. The latest from the Middle East, an Israeli strike at a school complex in Gaza, where Israel says Hamas was plotting attacks, but in Gaza, they say women and children were also killed in the strike. Where things stand on the latest Israel-Hamas ceasefire deal laid out by President Biden last week. And could we be on the verge of a wider war between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon? Plus, President Biden marks the 80th anniversary of D-Day and an incredible interview with one of the last remaining vets who was part of that invasion. An update on the Boeing Starliner, is it still smooth sailing? In political news, Donald Trump's ally Steve Bannon must surrender to prison by July 1st to start his contempt sentence. The FDA rolls back a Juul marketing ban. And tipping fatigue. Consumers say they're pulling back on tips for servers, drivers, and hairstylists. But we're going to break it down by age and gender to see who are the best and worst tippers. Plus, it is Friday. Cheers to the freaking weekend, what we are watching, reading, and eating. Let's start with the latest in the Middle East. We haven't covered it on the podcast in a few days, so tons of developments. To begin with, Israel carried out an airstrike on a compound that it said was used by dozens of Hamas and Islamic Jihad fighters inside of a UN school in central Gaza. The Hamas-run health ministry says that the strike killed more than 30 people, including 23 women and children. The UN says the school was being used as a shelter by Palestinians who had fled Israeli operations in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. UNICEF saying it is more evidence that there's really no safe place, especially for children, to go in Gaza anymore. Video analysis from the New York Times and other media outlets shows that one of the bombs used in the strike was made in the United States. Israel, though, says it is not aware of any civilian casualties as a result of the strike. They say the attack had precisely targeted Hamas operatives, including some who had actually taken part in the October 7th attacks, Israel releasing some of their names. A military spokesperson, Daniel Hagari, defended the attack on the school facility, saying, quote, "Our precise strike was based on concrete intelligence from multiple sources. The terrorists inside the school were planning more attacks against Israelis, some of them imminent. We stopped a ticking time bomb." He says Israeli forces had tracked militants using classrooms at the complex as a base of operations, and also went so far as to criticize international media for, quote, falling for Hamas's tactics. He says this is the 5th time that we've had to target Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists operating from inside UNRWA facilities, including schools and hospitals, which he says is part of Hamas's strategy to garner public sympathy. And there has been condemnation of the attack from many corners. And on that note, right before I sat down to record this podcast, I quickly checked to see if there were any updated numbers. The AP's latest report reads, quote, "Gaza hospital says fewer women and children were killed in Israeli strike on UN school than earlier reported." So, of course, we are not on the ground ourselves able to confirm any of this information. But a good reminder, as Moshe and I always say on this podcast, to just take a breath, because it can sometimes take a bit of time for the facts and details to really come out. Okay, now to the question of where things stand with the ceasefire proposal. The United States is continuing to push for the ceasefire and hostages proposal that President Biden publicly outlined last week. He called it the necessary starting point to bring the fighting to a close. On Thursday, the U.S. and more than a dozen countries, including France, Thailand, and Canada, all whose citizens were taken hostage by Hamas on October 7th, released a joint statement calling on Israel and Hamas to come to an agreement on that most recent ceasefire and hostages proposal. They write, quote, "There is no time to lose. We call on Hamas to close this agreement that Israel is ready to move forward with and begin the process of releasing our citizens." The statement says, "At this decisive moment, we call on the leaders of Israel as well as Hamas to make whatever final compromises are necessary to close this deal." It is a three-stage proposal that would ultimately result in a full and complete ceasefire and the release of the hostages. On Thursday, we did get Hamas's first response to the proposal. The Wall Street Journal reports that Hamas's leader in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, told Arab negotiators that he would accept a peace deal only if Israel commits to a permanent ceasefire. He says Hamas will not surrender its guns or sign a proposal. It comes as CIA Director William Burns is back in the region holding talks, trying to jumpstart the negotiations. But Hamas is not the only holdup here, even though the Biden proposal was really an Israeli proposal. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's governing coalition could be in jeopardy if he officially signs off on it. Two far-right Israeli ministers have threatened to quit and collapse the coalition if the prime minister agrees to it. So still a ways to go here. And the sticking point is really that word permanent. Israel will not commit to permanently ending the war until it feels that Hamas is gone in a way that is acceptable to them. And Hamas will not commit to a ceasefire deal unless it is permanent, believing that that is the only thing that would essentially ensure its own survival. So it is really hard to reconcile those two goals because they are basically at odds with each other. And then there is the war to the north, a potential war between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. Some reporting from Barak Ravid in Axios, he says the Biden administration has cautioned Israel against the notion of even a limited war in Lebanon and warned that it could push Iran to intervene. Israel and Hezbollah have been exchanging fire basically since October 7th, but things have been escalating dramatically in just the last 2 weeks. Some in the IDF believe that things have now reached a, quote, turning point. And you may have seen the images earlier this week. Attacks from Hezbollah combined with this extremely hot weather in the area ignited huge forest fires across northern Israel. It took Israel about 2 days to put them out. The U.S. and France have been trying to calm things down diplomatically. The goal is to prevent this all-out war between Israel and Hezbollah that would expand into a much wider regional conflict. According to Ravid, the Biden administration warned Israel that a ground invasion of Lebanon, even if it is only in the areas that are close to the border, would likely push Iran to intervene, potentially flooding Lebanon with pro-Iranian militias from Syria, Iraq, even Yemen, who would want to join in the fighting. Now, something that we don't talk about often, since Hezbollah started to attack northern Israel in the days after October 7th, more than 60,000 Israelis have been evacuated from the area and still have not been able to return home. But Matthew Miller with the Pentagon saying Israel has long maintained privately to us, and they have said publicly too, that their preferred solution to this conflict is a diplomatic one. From NBC News, President Biden joined French President Emmanuel Macron, Britain's King Charles, and other dignitaries to mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day, when the Allied forces launched a surprise attack that helped to liberate Europe from Nazi Germany. Biden addressed the crowd at the Normandy American Cemetery as he honored the veterans who fought in the defining World War II battle and helped to defeat Nazi Germany. He says democracy is never guaranteed.
The price of unchecked tyranny is the blood of the young and the brave. In their generation, in their hour of trial, the Allied forces of D-Day did their duty. Now the question for us is, in our hour of trial, will we do ours?
He went on to praise NATO's strength and unity, drawing an implicit contrast with his Republican rival Donald Trump, who aides say considered withdrawing from NATO. Leaders traveled from around the world to attend commemorations in northern France, but the real stars of the occasion were the handful of remaining veterans. About 150 American vets who took part in the Normandy landings attended the ceremonies, which could be the last major milestone for many of them. So people who were 20 years old when the Allied soldiers stormed the beaches of Normandy on June 6, 1944, well, they are now 100. And I want to play a part of this interview that CNN's Christiane Amanpour did with a D-Day veteran, 101-year-old Jake Larson. It is a bit longer than we would normally go, but I think it is worth it just to hear his account of the day. She starts by asking him if he remembers what it was like, what it felt like to just get dropped on that beach. Take a listen.
Do you remember what it was like when they just, I don't know, suddenly you find yourself getting out of one of those landing craft, you're on that beach. Do you remember what it was like?
Oh, do I like it was yesterday. I got on a landing craft and I had water right up to my chin. He let us out a little bit too far, but he was just a 17-year-old pilot for that boat.
Wow, you were all kids.
We were all kids, yes.
And did you know then what you were fighting for?
Oh, yeah, oh, definitely. That we knew, every one of us.
Tell us.
Every one of us was prepared to give our life to kick Hitler's ass out of Europe.
And you did.
And we did. We lost quite a few of it. I lost friends. Everybody lost friends. But we were soldiers. We were prepared to give our life.
Really just incredible stuff. And we're lucky that we still get to hear some of these firsthand accounts. Hard to go back to regular news now, but we do have some other headlines to get to. A quick follow-up to the space story that we reported yesterday. This is from CNBC. Boeing's Starliner capsule docked with the International Space Station Thursday, a milestone for the company's crew spacecraft in a crucial test flight. The spacecraft docked with the ISS at 1:34 p.m. Eastern Time, a bit later than expected, after NASA called off a previous attempt in order to fix a thruster problem with Starliner. The docking, though, marks the Boeing spacecraft's inaugural delivery of astronauts to the orbiting research lab. There are now 2 U.S.-built crew spacecraft docked with the ISS for the first time. So we've got Boeing's Starliner, and it joins SpaceX's Dragon capsule Endeavour, which arrived back in March. This mission represents a final major step before NASA certifies Boeing to fly crew on operational missions. Some politics now from the Associated Press. Steve Bannon, longtime ally of former President Trump, must report to prison by July 1st to serve his 4-month sentence. It is for defying a subpoena from the House committee that investigated the U.S. Capitol insurrection. U.S. District Judge Carl Nichols in Washington granted the Justice Department's request to make Bannon begin his prison term after a federal appeals court panel last month upheld his contempt of Congress conviction. Bannon is expected to seek a stay of the judge's order, which could delay his surrender date. He told reporters, quote, "I have got great lawyers and we are going to go all the way to the Supreme Court if we have to. There is not a prison built or jail built that will ever shut me up." And in a social media post Thursday, Donald Trump repeated his claim that Republicans are being persecuted by a politically motivated justice system. Worth mentioning that Nichols, who is the judge that ordered Bannon to report to prison, was nominated to the bench by Trump back in 2018. From CBS News, the FDA is rolling back its Juul marketing ban. The FDA announced Thursday it formally withdrew marketing denial orders that it had issued to Juul Labs in 2022, making it possible for the once dominant e-cigarette manufacturer to pursue authorization for sales. The product has been in limbo for years amid court litigation and additional review that the FDA said it was conducting of Juul's applications. At the time, the FDA said it was concerned about potentially harmful chemicals in Juul's e-cigarettes and also some, quote, insufficient and conflicting data it said the company submitted. The FDA now says, though, it has gained more experience with various scientific issues regarding e-cigarette products, and there has been some new litigation outcomes with similar products. The agency says that rescinding the marketing denial orders is not the same, though, as a new decision on whether to formally authorize sales of the e-cigarettes. Juul's applications have been returned to pending status. And Juul says, we appreciate the FDA's decision and now look forward to re-engaging with the agency on a science and evidence-based process to pursue a marketing authorization for Juul products. And finally, from NBC News, anyone have tipping fatigue? People are a little bit stingier in barber chairs and Ubers than they were just a few years ago. Nearly 3 in 5 U.S. adults have at least one negative view of tipping, with 35% saying that they believe tipping culture has gotten out of control. Leading the push against tipping, Gen Zers, millennials, and men. These shares of adults who say they always tip their hairstylists, servers at sit-down restaurants, and food delivery people have fallen about 8 percentage points since 2021, according to a Bankrate survey out this week. It's also down 7 percentage points for taxi and ride-hail drivers over the same period. So let's see where we were in 2021. 3 years ago, the economy was reopening from the pandemic. Inflation was higher than it is now, but so was concern for frontline workers. At the time, 3/4 of consumers reported always tipping restaurant servers, but today just 2/3 do. The survey reflects Americans' growing ease, bypassing ubiquitous tipping prompts from coffee shops to airport terminals in the post-COVID economy, especially as prices in general have risen. Many households tightening their belts. Experts say some of that newfound caution could be factoring into when, where, and how much people tip. So some numbers here, only 17% of Gen Z and 28% of millennials say that they tip at least 20% at sit-down restaurants. That is compared to 41% of Gen Xers and 52% of baby boomers. But this all does not necessarily mean that at least servers are worse off. Now, it does come as at least 25 states have raised or will raise their minimum wage this year. Several major cities, including New York and Chicago, are mandating a full minimum wage for tip earners. California has a new $20 hourly minimum wage for workers at big fast food chains. That took effect in April. And it is also clear that good old-fashioned cash still preferred in the era of card readers. In a survey from Spot On, 89% of restaurant workers said that if you're going to tip, they would rather you do it in cash. But I guess the problem is not a lot of people carry cash anymore, right? And it is Friday. Cheers to the freaking weekend. Time for what we are watching, reading, and eating. I have Moshe's picks. And I also have a special guest with me, my daughter, Alex. Alex, say hello.
Hello.
All right, so what is Moshe watching? He says he's going to be watching Hitler and the Nazis, Evil on Trial. It's a documentary on Netflix. I am going to be watching a new Amy Winehouse biopic on Amazon. I'm also hearing great things about Hitman on Netflix. And Alexandra, what are you watching this weekend?
I'm going to be watching Gabby's Dollhouse and Daniel Tiger.
Solid picks, Gabby's Dollhouse and Daniel Tiger. What are we reading? Moshe says he is going to be reading Tired of Winning by John Carl. I was going to come up with my usual Atlantic article or Washington Post article, but the truth is I am exhausted and I don't really want to think about work until Monday. So I'm going to mostly be reading to my daughter, Alex. Alex, what are we going to be reading this weekend?
We are going to be reading Pinky and Toad, Bernstein Bears, and the Princess Pineapple.
And this is a great suggestion that I got from Alex's teacher, is one of us takes the part of Piggy and the other one takes the part of Gerald. And it's a really fun way to read with your kids. So if anyone has kids who are learning how to read, I highly recommend. We also do love Berenstain Bears, oldies but goodies. And the Savannah Guthrie series, Princesses Wear Pants. That's what you meant, right, cutie?
Yeah.
Okay. And what are we eating? Moshe is going to be drinking LMNT. It's an electrolyte drink that you mix with everything you need and nothing you don't. No sugar, no artificial ingredients, no fillers. It helps to kick start your day and really helps to power your workouts. All right. So, Alex, what are you going to be eating this weekend?
I'm going to be eating pasta, broccoli, and chicken on the bone.
Chicken on the bone?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm going to be drinking water.
Drinking water. Okay. All great options. And Alex, how do you like your pasta? With butter and...
Parmesan cheese.
That's right. Moshe and I often talk about Parmesan cheese on this podcast. Okay, that does it for me and Alex. Thank you for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Review us in the App Store. Thank you so much for sticking with me these last couple of days. Again, Moshe will be back on Monday. And Alex, do you want to thank everybody in real time for listening?
Yeah. Thanks for listening to the Mo News podcast. Have a great weekend.
Okay, bye everybody.